Welcome to SUSECon 23 and our talk about the next generation of enterprise Linux. We give you here a short outlook of the design and the principal concepts of the workload-centric enterprise Linux that is coming soon. My name is Stefan Behlert. I'm a product manager working on enterprise Linux, especially on the server and the future technology sides here at SUSE. Today's agenda, and that's what I will talk about, is not only the past and the present, giving you a short recap about SLE 15 and what has been achieved in the last year. We will also talk about the structure, the content of the future product solutions that are coming. And in the end, you will get some information where to get more information, more updates, more downloads, and what the next steps are. Be aware, we are talking here about something that is upcoming, that is not yet production ready. So things may change when you read the information that is upcoming, or when you look even at this recording, because it's done quite a few days and weeks before you see it. And a lot of things can have changed in the meantime. Let's start with a look in the past and at the present also. You may have heard from some people that SLAS is dead or not active, and that's not true. SUSE is committed to SLE 15 for the long run. You can see it here. We support it well into the 2030s, providing updates and new developments with the refreshes and the consolidation service packs that are upcoming. We recently released Service Pack 5, which was a consolidation service pack, which means mostly bug fixes, but also a few feature and additional pieces that got added. We will continue that with SP6, which will be a refresh with a new kernel and major update stacks, and SP7 before at one point in time we switch over to the LTSS phase, where you will see mostly bug fixes and not so much new development and hardware enablement. But we are committed there until the 2030s, and we will continue to deliver this. But as you may know, a code base like SLE 15 has one disadvantage. There's a limitation on what you can do with new enablements, new structures, because we provide backward compatibility throughout the code base. And that also means there are limitations when it comes to new innovation, when it comes to new ideas, to new structures, to new things that you need. And that also limits not just us, but also limits us in providing you the things that you need. So at one point in time, it's time for a new code base, for a new product family, for making new decisions, new solutions available. And that is when the next generation will come. We have currently codenamed that SUSE Alp because we are doing a huge amount of changes in the platform providing the new solution family. And therefore, we decided to not go with names and specific final names yet, but go with a code name to make on one side clear there are huge changes coming, but also to give us the freedom to adapt the product family structure in a way that fits you and that helps you also to fulfill your needs and requirements. We are currently in the development phase, and as I mentioned, when you're reading the information at this point in time at the SUSECon directly or on the SUSECon digital later, and when you're looking at this recording, we may be a huge step moved forward compared to what we currently have. So take what I say with a little bit of grain of salt, because we are doing the changes as they come, and we plan then to have the first release in the upcoming months. An exact date, you may ask, for the release? When will the first customer shipment happen? Well, we have currently not committed to a fixed date yet for one simple reason. We don't want to be limited by a time burden, but rather have it done right instead of having it done on a fixed time and with the huge amount of changes we are currently doing and which we are still doing based on your input and feedback. It's how to say, a little bit of giving a false impression if you would say we come out at exactly this date. This is with a new code base, not necessarily the best way of acting. We want to provide you the solutions that you need and not just come out on time to fulfill a project plan or a schedule that has been set way before all the features were done. And when we have released the first solutions, we will continue with the development there and releasing further solutions, further products, further offerings, step by step in the upcoming years. So we talked last year already about the renewal of the enterprise Linux design, about the needs, the requirements that you have brought up and that you talked to us. And we talked also about the themes and characteristics. You may remember some of them. We talked about standardization, about having um, things in agreement with upstream put in the places where they belong, of having the files sorted out a little bit, making sure that the packages fulfill the file hierarchy standards, working there with upstream, but also avoiding unnecessary deviation from upstream practices that exist. We talked about ubiquity, about having the same deliverables wherever you run your workloads. So when you go and wonder where will my workload run in 5 years, in 6 years, in 2 years, you don't have to worry about it because your workload will already be there, will already be able to run there, and you will simply be able to move your workload around in the way that is convenient for you. We talked about the way we want to restructure the service packs so that they are less like a new product, but more like an ongoing setup point, an easy to identify point to have the deliverables that come um, being marked, not necessarily in the way that is done currently. And we talked about compartmentalization and the next steps of modularization, where we do more and less at the same time. All of that is inspired by the feedback we got from you about your customer needs, about the needs for your workloads, because what is in your heart and what's dear to you is to get the job done. And a lot of you are already looking at the journey to a distributed world where not everything is in one data center, but distributed among various locations, among different types of platforms and architectures. And of course, all of you were asking there um, to get updates to the code base because it's outdated slightly. They need for newer versions, for newer features, for newer hardware enablement, for better performance optimization that is in a lot of cases incompatible when it comes to the backward looking parts. All of that is motivating us to make the new code base um, into a better shape, into a good shape, and into something that really helps you to do your job. We talked about the timeline a little bit already. The development phase is currently running. We are now going more from an alpha into a beta phase. We have deliverables for all platforms available. They are available in the OpenSUSE build service. You can download them. You can use them for testing, for looking into them. Yes, they are changing constantly, but everything is available. So if somebody tells you this and that is not working, or this and that will not be available, or this fulfills your needs, you can have a look and check if that's the case or not. You can verify what we are doing. You can give feedback to us so that we can really adapt the platform and the products and solutions based on it to fulfill your specific needs, your specific requirements, to some degrees, of course. But in the end, doing the development in the open helps you and helps us to get a product out that is good and going towards great. But as mentioned, we are currently in the development phase, so things are still not as smooth as they should be. Nevertheless, when you're seeing this recording, we are in a kind of beta phase, and therefore we have stabilized a lot of the things already. Not everything is working yet, but you can test it and give us the feedback. So let's talk a little bit about the scope. We have compartmentalization mentioned. We will do lifecycle adaptations to fulfill the new needs that you have. We have requirements that vary from very fast updates up to long life cycles and runtimes of 20 years, 25 years. And we're working on making that possible. Of course, some compromises will have to be made, but with the new structure that we intend and that we have worked on, we see that we're in a good way to make it possible to bring both into the same bucket. We are doing, of course, the refresh of the components and the technology. You will hear a little bit about that later. The new code base, the new products and solutions will be available in parallel to SLE 15. There are disruptive changes. We will work on the product family structure, so not every product you're familiar with from SLE 15 will have an equivalent in the new family, but we will make sure that the structure fulfills what you need to do. Let's talk a little bit about the separation and the compartmentalization that was mentioned, because that's the granularity that really makes it possible to look into different life cycles for different parts of the system. I mentioned it. We are looking here at a workload-centric approach. What is dear to your heart, what is important for you, is the workloads that run on top of the whole stack. And you care about that workload, that it's performing well, that it's running good, that it's running constantly, and providing you the needs and the value that you request to do business. But all of those workloads are nothing if the stack below is not working good. So we try hard to make the stack as small as possible, but also as performant as possible and as flexible as possible. And we do this through compartmentalization, providing a different granularity on the delivered components and on separating the hardware enablement layer and the application layer. That means you have a kind of an host OS or base OS that provides the basic functionality that allows everything for the update, for the installation, for the maintaining, and for keeping the system running. And the application layer where you have the whole stack that supports your workload and makes it possible to run the solutions on top of it. This gives flexibility when it comes to selecting applications, but also when it comes to the life cycle. And of course, that also means that you have a different set of lifetime between the host OS and the various components. And that also means we need to look into the way we do support and how we deliver the support to you. The granularity on the application level side, on the compartmentalization, is currently done to a big degree through containerization because that makes sense and that allows us to really do different life cycles. You can see on the left side at the bottom picture a little bit how it works. You have the code base with all the RPMs, all the software that will create the various components, the containers, the images, whatever there exists on packaging format. And from those pool of components, we then create the various products and solutions. Now we talked a little bit about compartmentalization, about separation. What does this mean? Does this mean we are compartmentalization everything? We are containerization everything? Well, containers are not everything. Let's be very clear on that. When we talk about compartmentalization, yes, we prefer containers for that, but there is also other packaging formats and options exist also. Let's look at that from a little bit of a different perspective. Let's put all the various components that exist, all the software into three buckets. System services and tools, which are provided by SUSE, will be containerized and made available in a containerized form. You can see this, for example, on the workloads that we have already provided in the OpenSUSE build service on the ALP prototypes, for example, the GDM containers, as well as others. Then there is software and applications that is not necessarily called a system service or a system tool, coming either from SUSE with the products and solutions or from some third party. We want that preferred to be provided in a containerized form because that fits nicely into the whole system. Examples for that would be, for example, YAST or Grafana. And we will help you, of course, if you have an application, a homebrewn application or a third-party application that you want to containerize, to make this possible and to refactor that. We are looking into ways of doing that for you. And of course, we have applications and software that cannot be containerized, that cannot be separated in a good way into the various container formats that exist. We will provide, and we provide an option to install and run them on the host system directly with a separated installation space to make a separation here between the various components. An example, a very famous one, of course, is the SAP HANA, but there is also other applications that cannot be easily containerized. Let's talk a little bit of the values and the characteristics of the platform. Security is something that's dear to everybody. Everybody wants a system to be as secure as possible without having big work around it to make it possible. Security should be built in. And we have done a huge amount of work to make this exactly the case. Our secure supply chain is where it all starts. A certified environment for building the components is the base for everything. And with our EAL4 Plus certificate, we are having the highest possible security certification for this environment. And from there, you also get the updates and the support. Timely reactions on threats and incidents are a must have. not something that comes on top, but that should be built in. We talked a little bit about the granularity and the isolation into the various bits and pieces. This allows also to shrink the thread surface and to reduce the hardening work, because if you have to install less, then you can do really um, safe work and not spend so much on the various bits and pieces to make the system secure. Security built in. And of course, with confidential computing, we provide security also in potential hostile environments that exist outside. Separation of the host OS and the application layer is where it all starts. This creates different trust zones so that even if one part of the system gets infected, it does not spread over the whole system. The compartmentalization allows you also to increase the safety and the security of your system, because runtime zones and data of one application cannot bring um, any harm to the next application. And of course, we have the immutable host OS in the ALP platform being provided, which tracks what has changed, where you can roll back to a secure state, making it possible to have an always bootable, secured system available. And you will hear later about one session that is also taking place where you can hear more about the immutable host OS. But security is one part. In times of changes, you also need to make sure that the systems are running and that the costs for making them running and having the lights being turned on and kept are not exploding. So we looked into what does this mean? How can we support you in making the system handling easier? One part of it is the separation of the host and the application layer. We are decoupling there the hardware and the software refresh cycles. So you can really decide, do I need new hardware or do I keep the old hardware? Having longer run times there, which might be better for the environment and for your costs, but still being able to go to a new application, to have the application runtime being updated. On the other side, you might not want to change the application runtime, but want newer hardware, need newer hardware because it's less energy consumption, because it has more compute power, or for whatever reason. Both should be possible, and we want to make this available in the new platform. Nevertheless, everything depends on how easy is it to maintain. In times of understaffed ITs, the less time you have to spend looking at documentation and searching for documentation, the better it is and the more can be done. And we want to avoid that you have to search for documentation, but we want the system to be self-explaining, to have the documentation where you do the changes and not on some server far away. Lifecycle flexibilities helps you then to reduce the amount of times that you lose for migrations, for updates, to decide, to help you to decide when and what you want to update without avoiding that you're running suddenly into an insecure environment. And of course, we want to reduce the manual interaction where possible, because in the end, there's a lot of things, let's be honest, that's background noise, and you don't want to do and have your admins do that, but rather have them concentrate on the important parts that really brings value and money to you. So we will automate as much as possible if you want that, and make it also switchable on and off so that you can decide if you want the automation or if you want to do it manually. Workload centric means to get the job done and not just to have a system that you have to spend a lot of time with um, to make it really work in your environment, to make it work on premise, off premise, or bare metals, or on this or that cloud provider. You should not worry where you will be in a few years. On the other side, we also want to reduce the footprint because that's also where you need to spend time checking security fixes, hardening. All of that comes at mind when it goes into the footprint. We talked about reducing the background noise already, but we also want to enable the right stacks. And that means with the compartmentalization that we have, that we are able to provide several stacks that run in parallel without affecting unintentionally some parts of the system or the other. Let's have a look at the technologies that we will provide. First of all, if you ask about the various architecture level sets, you can see it here on this slide. We are going on the Intel AMD x86-64 platforms with version 2 of the architecture level set because this allows us to improve the performance for selected workloads and use case scenarios. And we will use the HV caps functionality of the glibc to prepare for the versions we compiled libraries and therefore give you the chance to use optimized libraries depending on what hardware you have. We have already demonstrated in the prototypes that this is working. And in the OpenSUSE Leap and Factory and Tumbleweed, you can already see some of the version 3 libraries and test if your workload profits from it. On the ARM side, as well as the Power PC side, no big changes here compared to what you see to SLE 15. On the IBM C side, we will raise also the architecture level set to something that is more newer. But every of the platforms has one caveat. We are no longer supporting 32-bit, and we are only going here with 64-bit platforms. On the core components, we will provide you with a kernel that is most likely version 6.3. You know, we decide the kernel versions rather late in the game normally, but we also need, of course, some time for the hardening of the kernel and for fixing issues with it. So currently we are targeting here 6.3 when it comes to the kernel version. Selected products will have a real-time kernel, but all of the products will work with the network manager. And we are switching here away from the wicket system that you're familiar with from SLE 15. This is also part of our standardization process where we really want to go with industry proven applications and tools. On the compiler and development side, we are currently working on GCC 13 and we will provide that as system compiler. Of course, similar to what we have on SLE 15 currently, we will have an updated application compiler available on a yearly basis. Keep in mind, we will not just have RPMs, but also containers. That means we are doing currently also updates to the update infrastructure and the update locations because we want to provide both RPM and container updates so that you really can get this service you're familiar with in both types. There are more changes on the core components, but please have a look at the various web pages we will have put up when you see that recordings and have a look at the prototypes and the base images that we will provide so that you see what has changed in your area of interest. There's an hardware enablement layer. I talked already about that. We will provide there an immutable root file system with transactional updates that will allow you to really make sure that you have an always bootable system. This does not mean that for every update you have to reboot. Don't worry about that. Our system that you may be familiar with from SLE Micro has read-write able directories outside of the root file system. It has a debugging container and an etc overlay, which allows you to avoid rebooting in case of updates. And we will also provide, of course, live patching. On the systems management side, the biggest changes are the introduction of Cockpit, which will step by step replace Just2 and several other management tools. SE Linux comes now with not just the framework being supported, but also with supported policies, something that we recently had only in SLE Micro and not on the SLES side. This will now come as standard. The separation of the host OS as well as the application layer allows us to really do that in a good way, and therefore we can introduce that now with supported policies. On the container management side, we will by default provide Podman. We have also a few other container management tools on the shortlist. And of course, if you need bigger and more, you can always use that. Our Ranger toolset is a good choice here to run on top of the systems. We talked a lot about of what will come. And I said it at the beginning, when you see that recording, things will have changed. We have in the past provided during the alpha phase prototypes on a 3 month base that allowed you to test early, to get changes incorporated early. And we are now starting to end that phase, but we will still provide downloads. And then we will go at one point in time into the beta phase, which will start shortly or around the SUSECon. So at the time of you seeing this, you will see that we go into the more familiar beta phase, where you have then the hardening and the adjustment phases. Still, changes are possible, and we are also willing to do more severe changes than we would do with a normal service pack on a SLE 15 base. But the emphasis is now really going towards the hardening and stabilities. And features are still getting added, of course, because we are SUSE and we are also keen on having technologies being included, on having you being provided with new features. You can influence the upcoming solution still with your feedback. The solution portfolio that we intend to provide based on the ALP code base will be shaped based on that input and already on the input provided. So you might be interested where can learn more. This was still a very high level view that you gave. So first of all, if you're here at SUSECon, there are several hands-on as well as further going sessions. You see them listed here. I really recommend the Linux Mountaineering hands-on session where you can really test on the hardware, the ALP platform, where you can play with it, where you can learn how to do things and see if you have wishes or issues with some parts of the system. And of course, there is, and I recommend that, the Immutable Host OS or the Immutable OS Today and Tomorrow talk, where you can learn more about how we do the read-only root file system and what this means for you and how we plan to enhance that. The SUSE Alp action is good to learn a lot about the details on the various platform features. And of course, more SUSE Alp related sessions are coming, and we are also sharing information on the various web pages that exist at the outside. So if you are not at SUSECon, have a look at our web pages. We will provide regular announcements, regular updates in informations so that you really can get informed. And with that, let me recap shortly. We are looking at the next generation from a workload-centric perspective and point of view. It's built from the ground to support the containers and the microservices, and it's a redesign of the whole product portfolio structure. It's based on your input, on your needs, on your requirement, on your wishes, and it's fitting for all business critical use cases. Trust and security is really a core component, and it's built in. This ranges not just from the immutable host OS, but also from the consideration of air-gapped scenarios from the beginning, from compartmentalization and reliability when it comes to the life cycles. Have a look at the deliverables that are already available and the documentation. You see here the link where to find the download links and the information. Nevertheless, in the next few years, we are looking forward to enhance this with zero touch, with self-management, self-tuning, self-everything. This is in the ongoing years to come. Not everything will be available on the first release, but step by step, we're enlarging the feature set here to make life for you easy, to make and to fulfill the promise we gave to you in the early years about convenience, about simplification of deployment, about simplification of use, the ease of use. Have a look at that. And if you're at SUSECon, don't hesitate to come to the booth and to talk to us. And with that, thank you for listening. And if you have questions, if you're interested in more information, talk to us, come to us, and we are happy to talk to you. Thank you very much.